Welcome to the Grow Like a Mother podcast. I'm your host, Jill. If this is your first time listening with us, welcome to the Grow Like a Mother family. This podcast is for moms who want to grow, who want to learn, and what better topic to bring you today than the Enneagram. I connected with an Enneagram expert named Alyssa, who is coming on the podcast today. She is an absolute gem. She's a certified Enneagram coach, and she hosts a podcast called Leadership Type Talk. All about Enneagram. And she first discovered it in 2019, started her journey being mistyped, like I guess a lot of us are. She thought she was a type 1. A year later, she identified that she was actually a type 3. And understanding this really transformed the way that she understood and expressed her inner world. So that aha moment kind of sparked a passion for her to help others feel seen and valued and understood through this incredible tool. So she started a business and she's been guiding leaders to grow their self-awareness, create meaningful impact, and lead with clarity and confidence. She does this all through the lens of the Enneagram. Outside of coaching, she is a new dog mom and she is an aspiring writer. And again, a type 3 who's all about making things happen. I am a type 2 on the Enneagram. If you are unsure what type you are, we encourage you to go take a quiz, take any old quiz on the internet, and then listen to this episode to get an idea of maybe some of the nuances and understandings of how you can really be sure of your type. And if you are looking at life through the lens of figuring out who you are, why you're here, what you're all about, what's your thing, I highly recommend you go and listen to the episode that I did with Joyce called Finding Your Thing. It's a really cool episode where we dive into all of this inner awareness and self-discovery. And I think that if you're interested in this type of work, Joyce is a really great woman to learn from. If you head over to the episode, I'm going to link it in the show notes here, but go check her episode out as well. And of course, stay right here because I'm about to drop a bomb and introduce you to Alyssa, the Enneagram expert. Alyssa, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Jill. I'm so excited to be here and nerd out about the Enneagram with you.
Oh my gosh, this has been a long time coming. We've tried to get our ducks in a row to record for many months now, and today's finally the day.
It is.
Yes. Okay. I am familiar with the Enneagram, but I don't suspect everyone listening is. So I feel like the
Yeah.
best place to start this conversation is a pretty foundational understanding of what is the Enneagram. And then from there, we can sort of dive into what type or number a person might be.
hmm
Um, and yeah, let's start there.
Yes, that makes total sense. So, oftentimes the Enneagram gets lumped into kind of the personality assessments bucket. So, think of like Myers-Briggs. Some people may have done DISC in the workplace, Strength Finders, Human Design. I'm not super familiar with that one, but that one would also be kind of in this category. But really, it's a personal growth tool. And I think that that's what people miss when they hear personality assessment. They just think, oh, it's a quiz, I find out my type and that's it. But really, it's more of a roadmap. So the whole point of the Enneagram is to show you where you are and then where you need to be and how to get there to become your best self. So again, personal growth tool. And I like to think of it like if we think of a triangle, we have behaviors at the top and then feelings in the middle. And that's usually what most personality assessments give you. They tell you something about your behavior or something about the way you feel or, those sorts of things. But the Enneagram takes it one level deeper and gets to your core motivations. So why are you feeling that way? Why are you behaving and thinking in those ways? And so that's what the Enneagram helps you realize.
It's a really cool tool. And I guess one question that I wondered, and when I was first hearing about it, which I will ask on behalf of the audience who can't ask, can your Enneagram type change?
I get asked this all the time. So I appreciate you asking this question. The quick answer is no. However, there's so many variables to an Enneagram type. So I think a lot of people just assume there's 9 types and that's it. But within those 9 types, each 9 type has a subtype and 3 subtypes. So really there's 27 just within those types. And then within the main types of those 9 types, you also have the levels of health. which you can look very different depending on what level of health you're operating in. So there is a lot of change, quote unquote, that can happen within your Enneagram type, but no, your Enneagram type stays the same.
Okay. And what are the different types we could be?
Yes. So we have type one, the reformer. You might have heard it called the perfectionist. I personally don't like that term because I was initially typed as a type one and I didn't question it because I was like, well, yeah, I'm a perfectionist. Like, this is me to a T. But when you dive in a little bit more, there's so much more to do with a type one than just perfectionism, and any of the other types can be perfectionistic. So the reformer is type one. Type two is the helper, sometimes called the giver. Type three, the achiever, sometimes called the performer. We have type four, the individualist. Fours typically prefer the term romantic, but when I'm working in a team setting with leaders, we go with individualist. Type five is the investigator or the observer. Type six is the loyalist. Seven is the enthusiast. Eight is the challenger, sometimes called the protector. And then type nine is the peacemaker.
Okay. And how does one determine what their type is?
Yes. So most people take a quiz. And like I mentioned, I was mistyped from a quiz because they're only about 60% accurate at best. And the reason for that is because we're very dynamic people, right? In one moment, we might look different than in the next moment. And tests can't account for whether you're feeling stressed or whether you're at a lower level of health or all of these things. And in the Enneagram system, all of those things are super important for pinning down like which type you are. And so I always say start with those core motivations. So each type has a core fear, a core desire, and then what I call a core challenge or the Achilles heel. And that is really going to help you narrow down your type. For some people, that's not helpful because they've never really thought about their inner world in that way. And so sometimes that can be a little tricky. So we say the next best option is to do some reading and research. That can also be really confusing. Moving forward after that, if you're still stuck, because a lot of types are twos, nines, and sixes look very similar. And that's honestly the majority of clients that I get. And so the next best step is to work with an Enneagram coach.
Okay. Amazing. Because you can do a full-on assessment and really get to the bottom of what somebody's type is a lot quicker than
Correct.
we can just sort of doing the Google, right?
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. And coaches can kind of pull things out of you and help you almost mirror it to you so you can see it in a different way.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah,
So this is really great. I like how succinct and um, it's succinct you were with describing what it is, what the types are, how we figure it out, because now we get to dive into the good stuff. Okay, I'm really
yes.
excited for our conversation because the way that we are approaching this framework is through the lens of boundaries and self-care. And
Mhm.
how do we how do we adjust the way that we are showing up for ourselves and giving ourselves what we need in terms of boundaries and self-care based
Mhm.
on the type that we are. So I'm going to let you kind of
Mhm.
lead the discussion here in any way
Yeah.
that feels like a good flow. And we can get just into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah, I love that. So I think, and we've kind of talked before we hit record, there are certain types that kind of have the stigma of having trouble with boundaries or having trouble saying no, right? And so, yes, that's true. There are definitely types that struggle with that. Most people think of type twos. If they know the Enneagram, they think type two for that. But really, any type can struggle with boundaries. It just might look different than maybe the boundaries that we consider boundaries in our mind, right? Like I think most of us consider boundaries being as boundaries with people. And that's certainly true. But there are other boundaries that certain people may need to work on. For example, types three and eights, we really need to work on the work life boundary of like not working too much and making sure that we're making time for fun or even rest. And so that's just kind of an example of other types that need those boundaries.
Yeah, I love that. I'm a type two. And
Mhm.
so I definitely understand this for my own type as the ability to say no to
Yes.
other people and to sort of direct my energy in a way that I feel in control of. So it's interesting
Mhm.
to note how each different type will have a different type of boundary that they might struggle with? Are there some other examples you can give us in terms of someone's listening, they're like, okay, work boundaries, people boundaries, I get that. Is there anything else that applies to me?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, do you want to just go through kind of each Enneagram type and maybe why
Let's do
those
it.
boundaries might be hard? Okay. So starting with, we'll just start with type one because that's easy. But type ones, like I said, they're the reformer, the perfectionist. They really desire to be good, right, and kind of perfect in everything that they do because they're rooted in that core fear of being wrong, evil, corrupt. And so they have these high standards that they're always trying to meet. And so for a type one, boundaries are going to be really hard for them because they feel responsible for doing everything the right way. So whether that's meal planning, school projects, bedtime routines, like saying no for a type one might feel like lowering their standards or letting people down. And they don't want to do that,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Yeah.
It makes total sense. And as I'm saying this, I'm able to sort of think to the different time management styles that I identify on my quiz. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
okay, this is going to be really helpful when I come on your podcast to be able to speak to the similarities between some of these. So, okay, thank you. That's
I
type
love that
one,
you brought that up.
perfectionist. Yeah,
Perfectionist. Yeah, I love that you brought that up too, because when I was looking at your quiz, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a type three, a type one, a type two, and there was one other type two, and I was like, oh, we're gonna have a good combo.
totally.
I love that. Okay, so the helper, you've kind of already gotten into it, honestly, but the core desire for the helper is to be wanted, loved, and appreciated, because their core fear is the opposite, right? They fear being unloved, unwanted, unappreciated, and so a type two gives. That's just what they do. They give, they help. They have this amazing intuition of kind of understanding what someone else needs help with. It's truly amazing. It's like their superpower. But boundaries are going to be really hard for a type two because they pour everything into the other, right? Whether that's family, whether that's community, whether that's the people at work. And that's often in expense of their own needs. So saying no to a type two might feel like rejecting people or losing connection with those people. And relationships are of the utmost importance for a type two. So that's why boundaries would be hard for a type two. So we say it is the most cliche advice for a type two, but really practicing saying no is so important for a type two. Okay, moving to the achiever or the performer. So their core desire is to be valuable, successful, and worthwhile. And so their core fear is rooted in feeling worthless or failure of any kind. And so boundaries are going to be hard for a type three because they want to be put together. Type threes are very image conscious. Again, it goes to their desire of being successful, valuable. And so for them, that image of being put together is going to be really important for them. And so boundaries can be hard for them too, because slowing down or saying no can feel like failure. And that taps into their core fear. And so they're going to want to avoid doing those things, even though that's part of their growth path and something that they need to learn to do.
Absolutely. And I just want to stop and interject one thing here as I'm thinking about
Yeah.
this, because as a type two, one of the things is, with the Enneagram typing is that I have a wing, and it can either be a wing one or a wing three because I'm a
Hmm.
two. And so I can see bits and pieces. If you're listening, you're like, yes, I think I'm a type this, but this resonates too. There's a reason for that. Okay.
Yes, and I love that you brought that up because there's so many connections to other types. And that's what makes typing tricky because we're like, oh, but I see myself in this and I see myself in this. And I'm glad that you brought that up because technically we have all nine within us. So it's good to point that out. You're not technically pigeonholed, but what it is whatever your core motivations are stemming from, then that's your dominant type. But I love that you brought that up. Okay, so the individualist or the romantic. So their core desire is to be unique and special. And their core fear is rooted in being ordinary or not having an identity. They're very identity focused. All of the heart types are, so two, threes, and fours. But for fours, this is really important for them. And so boundaries can be hard for a type four because they want to be deeply connected and emotionally present. And so they may struggle to say no if they feel like those boundaries could create a distance or make them feel emotionally unavailable.
Makes good sense.
Yep. Okay, so moving to the investigator. So their core desire is to be competent. They're what you think of when you think of subject matter experts. They're also sometimes, that professor that's like so unbelievably smart in whatever they're talking about. That's what I think of when I think of a five. They're the knowledge holders. And so their core fear obviously is the flip side of that, is to be incompetent. I would also add for a type five for a core fear is obligations being placed on them. And that kind of stems from their core challenge um, of feeling the need to kind of hoard their energy, knowledge, and resources. So anyone putting obligation on them are going to drain them of those, right? So why boundaries would be hard for a type five? Well, type fives feel like they only have a certain energy reserve. And so they're actually the type that really needs alone time. But in certain situations, they might feel guilty about carving that time out, or they might feel like it's impossible. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough whatever it is, because that's kind of their mindset is I don't have enough. So that's how it could be hard for a type five to hold those boundaries. And then moving to a type six, so the loyalist, their core desire is security and guidance. And their core fear, I always laugh when I say this, but is really fear itself because they are they have a lot of anxiety. Because for a type six, they're always thinking about the worst case scenario. What could possibly go wrong? And they think of everything. But what's great about that for a type six is then they have all these contingency plans for, okay, if this happens, then this is what I'm going to do. If this happens, then this is what I'm going to do. But for a type six, they need that guidance and support because they struggle to trust themselves. And so for a type six, boundaries are going to be hard for them because they don't want to let people down or be seen as unreliable. But also saying no can feel risky. Like, am I going to lose my security with this person? Am I going to lose my connection with this person? What's going to happen if I say no in this situation? And then again, like I said, they're worst case scenario thinkers. So they're going to think about all of the things that could go wrong if they say no or hold that boundary. Moving to the type seven, the enthusiast. So, sevens want to be satisfied and fulfilled and content and happy. And they fear being deprived or trapped in emotional pain. And so boundaries are going to be hard for a type seven because they're all about the fun. They're like the true FOMOs of the Enneagram. And so to them, saying no feels like I'm going to miss out. I'm going to miss out on every possible fun thing that I could be doing right now. But for sevens, they can go, go, go with the fun and excitement so much that it leads to obviously that overcommitting and the burnout as well. So that would be why boundaries might be a little hard for sevens. And then eights are the challenger. Their core desire is to be in control and independent and also protect those that are in their inner circle. That's why they're also sometimes called the protector. Their core fear is vulnerability or showing any weakness or feeling powerless in any way. I will say eights are probably the least likely to have boundary issues, but if they do, it's probably going to be internal, so in the home, because eights want to be in control. And so for them, relinquishing any of that control, putting up any boundaries of like, nope, I can't take that on. That's you. It's gonna feel like, oh, I'm giving away that control, and eights are gonna struggle with that. And then last, we made it to the peacemaker. So, as their name suggests, their core desire is to have peace of mind, that inner stability. And their core fear is conflict and tension, but also losing connection with others because they believe that if they have conflict with another person, it's automatically going to destroy that relationship or that connection. And so, for a type nine, boundaries are going to be hard because they don't want to disappoint others or create any tension or conflict whatsoever. And so nines are kind of what we describe as the going along to get along or the saying yes, even though they really want to say no, because again, they don't want that conflict and tension in their relationship.
This is like, as you can see, I'm taking crazy notes, and I'm sure everyone listening
I
is
love it.
because this is just so potent to be able to take a tool like the Enneagram and apply it to a really specific topic and
Mhm.
understand deeply, like not only what the struggle or challenge could be, but why. Why
Yes.
is this a challenge for me as a type whatever?
Hmm.
Wow.
And when you know it, you can name it and explain it to someone else. Like I feel like that's the true power of the Enneagram is it gives you a language to be able to describe what is going on internally, right? Like why am I feeling this way? Why is this so hard for me? Or why do I feel so great right now? And be able to explain it to someone else. Yeah.
Yeah. So having this information,
Hmm.
how can we make choices to either hold better boundaries or pay attention to boundaries or situations where we might feel like we should have them? And or are there good choices in terms of things to do for our self-care? Because to me, boundarying ourselves is a form of self-care. Like it's all part and parcel. The idea is that we are protecting our energy, protecting our autonomy, protecting our sovereignty over our decision, like the whole thing, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you have specific ideas or
Yeah.
tips? Yeah,
Yeah,
let's get
absolutely.
those. Okay.
Yeah. And that's great because really, I feel like a type specific self care is really going to be rooted in their healthiest version of that type, but also their growth path. Because that's really where you're going to start seeing that personal growth, that relaxation, that okay, I'm owning who I am and I'm moving towards that healthy side of me, right?
Mm.
So there are a lot of things each type could do to practice self-care, but I'll just give one tip per type just due to time too. But for type ones are all about responsibility. And so for them, it's really hard for them to have fun and relax. And so for a type one, self-care would look like, this is going to sound crazy, but scheduling relaxation. So type
Mm-hmm.
ones are very scheduled. They're planners. They love planning. And so for them, they actually have to be very intentional with scheduling that relaxation. But with a type one, they need to make sure it's guilt-free. So having that self-compassion, having that grace to say, you know what? I need this time because it's going to help me be my best self. It's going to help me be more perfect later, right? Whatever the type one needs to say to themselves to make that time guilt-free. Um, and also realizing that that recharging time for yourself is you being responsible because it's going to bring out your best self. So that would be what I suggest for a type one. Type two, we've kind of already covered with that really learning to say no. And I know it's so cliche, but for a type two, it's really going to be important. And I think for them, it's repeating whatever mantra you need to say to yourself to go, this does not make me a bad friend. This does not make me unlovable. This is not going to ruin this relationship. It's going to make it stronger because I can't pour from an empty cup. So I have to refill it in order to keep the relationship going strong.
So would it be fair to say sometimes saying no to others and or saying yes to yourself more? Like, would that be another way to
Yes.
reframe it? Okay.
I love that. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great
Just
that's a
take
great
that one.
idea. I love it. I love it. For a type three, type threes and type eights really are what you would consider workaholics. Type three being kind of the traditional workaholic. Type eights are more play hard, work hard. They're just constantly doing and going. But for a type three, it really looks like unplugging from productivity. And as a type three, this is really hard because I'll say I'm having rest, and what I'll have is Netflix on, and I'll be on my computer working. That is not rest for a type three. It really looks like unplugging. So it can sometimes threes can look very one. It gets into subtypes, which we're not going to go deep into right now, but really scheduling it and considering that work. Whatever you need to do to reframe it, rest equals work. So getting out into nature, taking a walk, it doesn't have to be very long, but just making sure to schedule it and not budge on it is important for a type three. For type fours are very emotional and they can be a little negative. And so for a type four, it might look like practicing daily gratitude and focusing on kind of balancing those negative emotions because type fours can kind of get into the spiral of thinking negatively. It kind of taps into their core challenge or their core passion that they really struggle with. And so balancing that kind of negativity, the feelings of longing that type fours have with what's going well, what am I grateful for today, to making sure that they're not spiraling and continuing down that negativity line. For a type five, this is also a little cliche for type fives, but type fives are in what we call the head triad. And so they are always in their head, thinking, overthinking, thinking about knowledge, thinking about why things are the way they are. And so for a type five, self care is going to look like getting into your body. So that
Mm.
might be physical movement of some kind. So it doesn't have to be something crazy, but yoga, walking, dancing, really tapping into how your body is doing, because type fives are very distant from their feelings. So, really being able to prioritize that physical movement helps you tap into how is my body feeling? How am I doing? Instead of being all up in your head all the time. And then for type sixes, this one actually has been good for me as a type three, but I have aligned to a type six. But a few of my type six friends have actually implemented this, and this is limiting doom scrolling. So type sixes, again, remember, they're the worst case scenario thinkers. And so anything that's negative or scary or anything like that is just going to perpetuate their worry, their anxiety. And so really reducing exposure to any of those things are going to be really helpful for you for self-care purposes. And also not kind of have you spiral into analysis paralysis or, fearing everything and not being able to leave the house. I mean, that's like the low levels of health for a type six, is not being able to leave the house because you're just so fearful. I would also say for doom scrolling too, but also social media. I know some of my six friends have also decided to get off of social media as well.
Yeah, it's that comparison that's always in your face, right?
Yes. Yes. And I would say that too for a type four as well. Type fours are often comparing themselves to others. And so if that's hard for you, if you struggle with that, taking a social media break would be helpful for you too. Type sevens, it looks like consistency. So type sevens, again, are the FOMOs. They are want the fun, the excitement. And so they often flit from idea to idea to idea and never really stick with anything. So consistency can be really hard for sevens. And so making sure that you are like staying consistent, but also realizing that even though, it feels maybe like a sacrifice or that you're doing something boring, because sevens don't want to be bored, um, these periods of self care and rest are actually going to help you function at your best. And so making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure that you're, nourishing meals, all of the things. So really just leaning into the boring because it's actually going to be really helpful for you long term. Type eights. So again, type eights, core fear is to be vulnerable or show weakness in any way. And while that can be a strength in certain situations, it can also be a downside because you're not really willing to accept help from anyone because help equals weakness. And so when you need that self-care, just understanding that it doesn't mean you're losing power, it doesn't mean you're losing control, and it doesn't mean you're unable to take care of yourself. That's not what asking for help means, right? It's letting yourself be loved and cared for by someone else. And that's a kind thing that you can do for yourself, even if it feels a little vulnerable and scary. And then lastly, a type nine, I would say having a really great morning routine that gets you up and moving and energized. Type nines can be stereotypically considered a little passive. Because they so often go along to get along, they become a little self-forgetting. And so they don't really know, what do I want? What do I like? What do I need? And so establishing that morning routine can help you kickstart your day on a really good note, positive note, because you're starting your day with what you need and you've identified it. And so hopefully you can help bring that into your day moving forward.
I want to like drop my mic. It would get broken, but this
Yeah, don't
has
do that.
been this has been so helpful. I know
Good.
that I can. see so many. I mean, I'm geeking out on just the time management aspect and the rest and the productivity and the habits and the self, like all of this, you're speaking my language and I'm feeling so personally validated with my framework and how it
Hmm.
matches. Like honestly, I'm kind of rethinking my whole business at this point. But
Oh my goodness.
that's the power of this information, right? That's the power of this tool.
It is. It
Now,
is.
this is an old tool, an old
Yes.
framework. This is not
Very.
new. Can you tell us a bit of the history?
Yes. So some of the history is a little hazy, not gonna lie. Some people have dated it back like tens of thousands of years. But that is not really the Enneagram we know today. So the Enneagram we know today was a little bit closer in our time. Don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive the 1900s. Um, I think mid, if I'm remembering correctly. But really, it was the work of lots of different people combining certain elements together, right? And so Claudio Naranjo is the one who's kind of the father of the Enneagram as we know it today, I would say. But yes, it's lots of ancient traditions. Some of the elements are rooted in things like Christianity or Judaism. So it goes back, really, really far. Even some mysticism from
Mhm.
way back when has been pulled in. But again, the full extent of like how the Enneagram came to be and then how we have it now is, like I said, hazy. There's no direct path.
Right. And just
Yeah.
out of curiosity, is there any connection that you're aware of or could see between like the practice of numerology and the Enneagram? Like, is
Mm.
there anything there?
Probably because the Enneagram, um, the numbers threes, the three holds a lot of information in the Enneagram. So we have groupings of three in the Enneagram system that are called triads. Also, the numbers three, six, and nine form a perfect triangle in the Enneagram graphic that I know looks very cultish. I've had people ask like, "Are you in a cult?" No, it's just a weird Enneagram symbol, but they form a perfect triangle, and so that also holds meaning in the Enneagram system as well.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
If people are listening and they have their interest piqued and they're just like as alive and electric about it as I am right now, how can they work with you? How can they use you as a resource and a tool and a support to either type themselves correctly or really do something with this information? I guess first
Mhm.
off, my question is like, what does an Enneagram coach do? How can people use you? And then please let us
Yeah.
know how we can like literally get in touch with you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking this. So, Enneagram coaching is really two parts, I would say. The first part, well, actually, no, maybe three. The first part is really finding your type and understanding that type. The next part is diving deep into all the different components, right? Like you mentioned, the wings, there's the stress and growth numbers, there's the different triads, there's your levels of health. I mean, there's so much with the system. But not only understanding it, but being able to tie personal experiences, memories, and things like that to your type and making a connection so that you can start to really see and notice where these core motivations have been cropping up for you, which helps us in turn recognize patterns that maybe aren't serving us. And it can also help us recognize, okay, where do we need to go? What's your growth path? What are the steps that are going to get you there? And so then really the third part is, okay, now that you know your type, understand where it shows up for you. Now, what can we do? What goals do you have? What do you want to work on to start moving you towards your growth path?
Amazing. And
Yeah.
if someone's like, yes, please, me, where do they find you?
Yes. So my business is Enneagram Leadership Co. Currently, my website is being revamped, so that is down right now. But you can find me at paperbell.me/Alyssa dash Nicole dash coaching. I'm assuming you'll probably
We'll
put
put it in
links
the
in the
show notes.
description.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And I offer just like a one-off typing interview. So it's just like an hour long. If you just are really not sure what your type is, you've done a quiz, maybe you've read about it and you're like, I just don't know. That's a great starting point. As you said, and I've said, it's not just a one and done system. It's not like Myers-Briggs. It's not like the other ones. So the goal isn't just learning your type. It's now how do I use it? So I offer a 6-week coaching program, and that is really that second part of really getting into your type, understanding where it shows up for you. And then beyond that, we can tack on more sessions once we kind of identify where you want to go with it. And then I also offer teams trainings as well. Um, if you want to learn, more about how you use it at work and beyond. And then I also have a podcast. It's called Leadership Type Talk, and it's kind of a mix of interview and solo, but right now it's mostly interviews of people using the tool and how they've experienced transformation in their lives and businesses and work.
Yeah, it's an excellent podcast. I will make sure it's linked as
Thank
well
you.
so people can go and take a listen.
Awesome.
And I'll link when I'm on there, I'll link my episode as well. So you guys can kind of hear this conversation like continued. Or, I mean,
Fabulous.
depending on which one comes out when, maybe you already have and you're
Right.
coming over from Alyssa's podcast. Um, but yeah, this has been so
Sounds great.
fantastic. I so appreciate you and your expertise
Yeah,
and your time today.
absolutely.
Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. This has been great. I love nerding out about the Enneagram, so anytime I can chat with anyone about it, it's always a good time.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome back anytime.
Oh,
I feel
thank you.
like you lit a fire.
Thank you. I love
Awesome.
that.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And to everyone who is still hanging with us until next week, keep on growing like a mother.